And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the week off. He'll be back with us on Monday. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a Republican assemblyman representing Fresno in the California State Legislature. You can follow him on X at David Tangipa. Assemblyman David Tangipa, welcome.
Well, John, it's always great joining you when I can.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. So let's start out with the bullet train here in California, where the federal government seems to be over it. At least the Trump administration does, and his allies in Congress. And Donald Trump has indicated it's time to cut bait on that loser project and move on to something else. Gavin Newsom, on the other hand, who takes the reflexive opposite position of every position that Donald Trump takes, has stated that we should continue with the bullet train. He regards the bullet train as a smashing success and says that anyone who says otherwise is a liar. Could you believe the governor is making that claim publicly and doing so with a straight face?
Well, I think the governor needs to try to get ahead of something, and he needs a win out of California. And to admit that the high-speed rail has been a failure would be to admit that him as governor of California is also a failure if we couldn't get this project done. So, the governor is going to have to decide one way or the other. Can we actually get something done in the state of California? Or just like the train to nowhere, California is really going nowhere fast?
What I don't understand is, if you're Gavin Newsom, you can acknowledge reality. The train is not completed. It's never going to be completed. It costs a fortune. They keep kicking the can down the road in terms of the completion date. You know this thing is a disaster. You know anyone who's paying attention to this is aware that it's a disaster. You weren't the governor when this thing passed. Jerry Brown was. This is Jerry Brown's train, not Gavin Newsom's train. Why doesn't he just blame it on Jerry Brown and acknowledge reality? That seems to be the smarter play.
Well, I think the governor really is just going to go through, and he has blamed, whether it's the legislature, whether it is Jerry, or he inherited this project. But if he's going to put out there that he couldn't do anything with it over the 8 years as governor of this state, it's just going to show that he is also part of that same failure.
Yeah, when he runs for president, I have a feeling that the bullet train is going to be put front and center in the Democratic primary because, if you go back in the old days, a lot of Democrats are New Deal Democrats where they like to build things, they like to provide union jobs, they like to expand the size and scope of the government by providing more services. And if you support a project that doesn't result in anyone being able to use it, you support a project that's never going to be completed, I would imagine that there are going to be plenty of candidates that don't have any skin in the game within California who are going to be perfectly capable on that debate stage in the Democratic primary of poking all kinds of holes in his arguments that the bullet train is a smashing success. It's not going to be a good look for him.
Exactly. And I also think the main question people are going to ask is Gavin Newsom's track record. And they're going to go, is San Francisco better today than it was before Gavin Newsom? I think a lot of people can say no. Then they're going to ask California, is California better today than it was before Gavin Newsom? I think that's going to be a no. And then when people are asking, who's the next president of the United States? What's their track record? And California, time and time again, Gavin Newsom's failed track record is going to be just as reflective as high-speed rail. It's failures across the board.
Gavin Newsom is doing anything and everything he can do to attract national attention. Most recently, it is through redistricting, where he has pledged to redraw the congressional district lines in California and put an initiative on the ballot to allow voters to approve his map. That, of course, is required because voters went to the ballot and approved of the nonpartisan commission to draw the line, so he would have to go back to voters to change that. What is the buzz in Sacramento among Democrats regarding what Gavin plans on doing? Because I'm sure they'd like to be in the majority in Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, and they're going to need to find seats to make that happen. However, it's a big ask. I would imagine if you're a Democratic member of Congress, you don't want to have to give up Democratic constituents to put them some other place with the hope of winning another seat. And you have a tougher district to run for reelection in, and you have all new constituents that you have to introduce yourself to. And then you have the fact that we're losing population, so we're going to lose between 3 and 5 seats. You're going to end up with a lot of member-on-member races after the next census, and that's going to cause that caucus, that Democratic caucus in California, to really go to war with one another in so many different ways. What's the buzz among Democrats in Sacramento about this redrawing of the lines?
I think you're spot on that this is actually causing rifts here and there. I'll tell you this, I was actually surprised that there are a few Democrat colleagues of mine that actually don't want the governor to get into this game of, well, if a different state is gerrymandering, let's gerrymander ourselves, especially when a lot of people here are looking for, who's going to actually get towards the work that we need in this state. There's a different assembly member out of San Jose that is actually angry that the governor is playing this game, that if they're gerrymandering somewhere else, it's actually our turn to lead by example on what not to do. So the buzz is actually fairly interesting. And we're going to have to see when we get back to Sacramento what the governor is going to decide, because this special election is going to have to happen quick if that's what they want.
Do you think it's going to be a done deal that voters will approve this? And I say that because Proposition 1, which Gavin was behind 110%, barely got over the finish line. They had to count votes weeks and weeks after Election Day to find the votes they needed to get that thing into the end zone. That initiative also really had no formal opposition outside of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And they didn't have the resources to go on television and on the radio and in the mailboxes the way the Yes side did. Right now, as we're lining up for this potential special election in November, it's clear that won't be the case. There will be an organized opposition to this, where former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger said that he's willing to travel up and down the state against it. Charlie Munger, who is a rich donor who helped fund the first initiative that created the Independent Commission, said he is going to open up his checkbook and do whatever it takes to defeat this thing at the ballot box. In addition to those two, you have Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and I'm sure congressional Republicans will do whatever it takes to defeat this thing at the ballot box as well. Do you think Gavin will win in November, or do you think the jury's still out?
I think Gavin really needs a win right now, which is why we haven't been called into a special session earlier than not. I think that is where the governor put himself all the way at the forefront of fighting what's coming out of Washington, what's coming out of Texas. And so he knows that however he proceeds forward with this, has to guarantee a win, because he can't get to the ballot box and have this fail and then also expect that to carry forward with his presidential. So I think he's treading very lightly as he moves forward with this. And I really do think these next 10 days, what's going to happen out of Texas and what's going to happen here in California is really going to show how we move forward.
What's the relationship like between Democrats in Sacramento and Gavin Newsom? And I ask that question because I know plenty of Democrats in my own personal life who love Barack Obama. In the 90s, I knew Democrats who loved Bill Clinton, genuine affection. I know Democrats who loved Nancy Pelosi, and her members in the House of Representatives would be willing to walk on water for her because she was a master parliamentarian and could raise gobs of money for them in their bids for re-election, and that endeared her to them. However, of all the Democrats I know in California, I don't think any of them love Gavin Newsom. I think that they find him acceptable, and he's a Democrat who can hold the seat for them, but they don't genuinely love him. They don't have genuine affection for him the way they had for Obama Clinton and Nancy Pelosi. Do you get the impression that your colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle have genuine affection for him, or do you get the impression that they just tolerate him too?
I think you're actually 100% spot on. There are multiple individuals that I've talked to in the Capitol on how they feel with that relationship. And I think a lot of us, even being an elected member, we just want somebody to come speak to us, give us direction. And truly, we haven't gotten that out of our governor. And that includes the majority party that's frustrated with him as well in this state. So I think that you've hit it spot on, that the relationship isn't there. They have to pretty much fight against each other to get where they want. And it may be a general direction that they agree on, but I know that they don't always agree with the other individual.
Gavin Newsom is an absentee landlord and has been for quite some time. I would imagine that as he gets deeper into his presidential ambitions, he's going to be around a lot less, and he's going to be in other states campaigning a lot more. How much does it complicate things in the state capitol when you have a governor who just doesn't care?
Well, I can tell you this. I don't think it could get any less seeing him. I think I've only seen him one other time in the Capitol since I've been there as an elected official. And I think that's going to be very reflective when, again, if he's trying to run for president, that's what's coming out of California, that if he's not even coming in talking to us as the legislators, how are the American people going to feel about him? So I think honestly, he couldn't come into the Capitol any less than he does now. So it's going to be a very, very interesting campaign moving forward.
Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, announced that she would not be running for governor. Depending on who you read and who you talk to, different people think that her not being in the race benefits different candidates. Politico had a piece out saying that Katie Porter would likely be the one that benefits the most with Kamala Harris not in the race. I don't see it that way. I think that the lieutenant governor, Eleni Kounalakis, probably benefits more than anyone else because, A, she has the most money, B, she is a billionaire, so she can put as much money as she needs to put into her bank account to get over that finish line. And she also has two jobs in her past, ambassador to Hungary and lieutenant governor, that don't really involve many duties. So she has no record that you can pin her down on. I talk to people in Sacramento, and they say that they don't really have much contact with her either. That Gavin's never around, and she's around even less than he is, and nobody really knows much about her. Do you think at this point it's safe to say that she's the front runner?
I think she's pretty safe, but I do also think Katie Porter, having been on the ballot as of recently on her Senate bid, just the other election cycle. But I'll tell you this, I wanted Kamala Harris to be on that ticket, but that's really just telling you this, that she doesn't want to be the next governor of California. I think that there are actually a lot of candidates on the Democratic side of things that are looking at the state of affairs, and they don't want to inherit what Gavin Newsom is about to give to them. So it might be better for their future political careers to wait instead of becoming the next governor of California. But this race is going to be very interesting. I know we've got quite a few candidates, but I'll tell you this, being in Sacramento, we're going to have some issues moving forward from the budget deficit and the homelessness problem and just everything that Gavin Newsom's going to leave. So I'll make sure to pray for whoever is the next governor.
When you listen to these candidates, particularly the Democratic candidates for governor, they want to talk about Donald Trump. They want to talk about abortion. They want to talk about the Supreme Court. They want to talk about immigration. They want to talk about a bunch of federal subjects that don't really have much to do with what goes on in Sacramento on a day-to-day basis. I don't get the impression that these people have really thought through the insurance crisis or thought through the budget crisis or thought through the homeless crisis or crime that's on the rise or any of the problems facing California today. Do you get that impression too?
I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think that's why the leadership in the state of California, the Democrats who have been in charge of this state 100% for the last 20 plus years, are starting to realize that they're not on message with what real Californians want. Every Californian that I meet, they're not asking me, hey, what are you going to do for redistricting? Or what are you going to do to take on the guy who's in Washington? They're simply asking, what are you doing to take on the cost of living? My utility costs are insane. My car insurance and my home insurance are also insane. And can we at least create somewhere of affordability? But the games that are being played here in California are really getting tiring for especially the voters. And so I think people are starting to wake up, and they're going to realize that even more moving forward.
Do you think the Republicans will put a candidate on the November ballot to face off against whatever Democrat makes it into the runoff?
I do. I actually think we have two pretty good candidates right now with both Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco in those areas are both talking about the right message. I've done policy with Steve Hilton before. I've met Chad Bianco as a sheriff down in that Southern California area. So we've got two good candidates right there. We just need to make sure that once it comes to getting on that November ballot, what we can do to make sure we can carry that person to the end of the finish line.
Do you think that involves Donald Trump getting involved in making an endorsement if it looks like those two candidates will cannibalize each other and two Democrats would make it onto the November ballot?
Whether the president wants to weigh in or not is fine. I really do think Californians are just looking whoever is going to be the most California-focused candidate. So I think the president's role can play into it, but moving forward, we'll probably just it probably won't have too big of an effect on who makes it on to November.
Assemblyman David Tangipa, Republican representing Fresno in the California legislature. You can follow him on X at David Tangipa. Assemblyman David Tangipa, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me on.
It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And if you've got a vacation coming up that's going to result in you being on an airplane or a cruise ship where you don't have cell service, guess what? All you have to do is subscribe to the podcast edition of this program, and you can take Randy and I with you. Only we're not going to take up any space in your cruise ship cabin, although we will take up space on your iPhone. Celebrate summer at Resorts World Las Vegas. Resorts World Las Vegas offers a 5.5-acre pool complex with 5 unique pool experiences and the largest elevated pool deck on the Las Vegas Strip. IU Day Club is a stunning oasis inspired by the islands of Southeast Asia. Be caller number 9 right now at 888-790-5222. That's 888-790-5222, and you'll win a Resorts World summer getaway, which includes a 2-night stay at Resorts World Las Vegas, 2 VIP passes at IU Day Club, and $175 in food and beverage credits. All of this provided by our friends at Resorts World Las Vegas, now offering no resort fees and complimentary parking. Good luck dialing. The federal government says that food stamps can no longer be used for sugary soda. I think that's a great idea. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Your calls coming up right here on The John Phillips Show. It's The John Phillips Show. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., said the federal government will no longer allow you to use food stamps for sugary sodas. I think that's a great idea, and I wish it involved all junk food. What say you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Let's begin with Linda in Burbank. Linda, hello.
Yes, I know an alternative soda. What do you call it? What's that soda? It's not soda. It's extract. They've got root beer extract. They've got like peppermint extract. I use those two. I put them in water. You just put a pinch of it in water, and it says it has sugar in it, but you just put a pinch of it in water, and the water is going to take over the sugar. And When I make brownies, instead of sugar, I use Splenda. When I run out of that, I'm going to use stevia instead.
Well, I don't use any of that in my soda. However, I drink the LaCroix. I drink the flavored waters all day long. And there's no sugar in any of those, and those help keep you hydrated. In terms of the Splenda or the Equal, I stay away from that stuff because anything that kills lab mice is not good for me.
But I wasn't talking about soda.
Yeah.
I put that extract in the water, not soda.
Okay. I gotcha. I smell what you're cooking. And it's brownies with Splenda. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Steve in Riverside. Steve, hello. Steve, are you there, sir? I heard a zipper. You at the urinal? Done with the urinal? Just beginning at the urinal? All right, let's move on and go to George in Northridge. George, hello.
Yeah, John, it's a good idea, but what I kind of will question is how is it going to be implemented? How is it going to be policed? And what are there going to be consequences for, if you're doing the wrong things? Because everybody knows anytime government gives money, there's going to be all this abuse. And the worst thing is, now in this country, what I see is everybody feels they're entitled to government, handouts. They say, well, I'm an American, so I have the right to do these things. But one thing we lack in this country is we need to learn how to be responsible for ourselves and accept the consequences for our actions.
I would imagine that there are algorithms that you can use that would prevent those cards from being used to purchase soda. It's like, have you ever tried to look at a questionable website in your office, sir?
Yeah, but, it's remember that guy that called back about how that lady was able to buy that, a bottle, and how they go and, go pick at a liquor store and you can, scan the food, but then you can put the food back and then you just get that bottle.
Yeah, I guess if you scam it, you could still use it to purchase items that we don't want you to purchase. But my guess would be if you try to buy it the proper way, it'll block it from happening.
Well, I'm sure, because I know, there's there's these cards that you get that, only allow you to purchase things, say, just at Walmart. And, if you get, pharmaceuticals or, things that you really need, you can't go in there and say, I want to buy a TV with it. They won't allow that to happen. I'm sure that's a way it'll probably work. But I think the worst will be, these corner liquor stores, these mom and pop shops that can get away with that.
Oh, yeah. And those are the entities that you can lean on if you're the government. You can tell them that if you find out that they're illegally selling soda or different items that aren't on the approved list to people who are using food stamps, you can take away their ability to be a vendor for EBT cards. And that'll hit them in the pocketbook, and then they'll shape up.
Well, I really hope that, it'll be implemented. I really do.
Well, thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate that. Liquor stores are not supposed to go around the law and illegally sell soda to people on welfare. They're supposed to sell pop-off vodka to minors like God intended. Let's go back to the phones and welcome Will in San Pedro. Will, hello.
Hey, John, how you doing? I just want to say I appreciate what you're doing. But I remember the first time I heard this come up, I think it was last year, as far as taking away the sodas and the Cokes from the EBT program. And, it makes sense. I'm a parent of two. I mean, you want to make sure that your kids are eating the right thing or people are being healthy. And then you soon heard about the counter argument being that you're taking away people's choice, and people just because they're poor should have the same choices as, people that are not. And then you soon hear that some of the funding for that spin was paid for by Coca-Cola, the lobbyists, to groups like the NAACP to kind of really boost up that narrative. And then it all kind of makes sense when you just follow the money, right?
Sure, and that's big business. I mean, if you think about it, the percentage of people that are on food stamps is huge. The federal government has the deepest pockets in the entire country. If you're Coca-Cola, you want to be able to sell your product to this market. And if your product gets pulled, that's going to hurt your bottom line. So you're going to do everything you possibly can to keep your product on the approved list so you can move as much Coca-Cola as possible.
Right? Makes perfect sense. Dirty pool. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much for the call. Funny story. A good friend of mine was once an executive at a big produce company. And she was as right-wing as they come. However, her job at that company was to run around funding these left-wing groups that demand that fresh fruits and vegetables be served in inner city schools and those sorts of things. And I asked her, I said, you're to the right of Attila the Hun, and all you do is fund left-wing organizations. What gives? And her answer was, well, when I fund these left-wing organizations, they demand that the school districts buy a bunch of fresh produce, and guess who's there to sell it to them? And I said, now I understand. Let's go to Kathleen in Rosemead. Kathleen, hello.
Hello, I love your show. You make my day, but I'm against food stamps, period, because there's so much abuse. But I think all sugar drinks, all junk food should be completely banned. Buy good food.
Yeah, I don't understand why that's so controversial. If you're on food stamps, my guess is certain things in your life haven't gone the right way. If someone's willing to belly up and put down some money so you can have fresh, healthy meals on a daily basis, I don't understand what there is to complain about.
Me either.
People in most parts of the globe would give their right arm to have access to fresh, healthy meals. And here, they just look at you like you're on drugs and go, where's my Coca-Cola?
That's right. It's abused. I've seen the abuse with food stamps right in front of me at the store. And there's too much stuff like that going on, trading the food stamps between friends. A lot of things that it's just cheating, and it's not doing young people any good or people any good to keep living on this junk food. Diabetes is out of control. Our youth are too fat because of junk food. Start eating good food, and it'll help you to live to be 90 like I am. Have a good day, and God bless your work. I love you guys. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate that. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show. If you'd like to email the show, you can at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. If you want to call in, it's 800-222-5222. 1-800-222-5222. Let's begin with Garrett in Fallbrook. Garrett, hello.
Hey, how you doing today, John?
Good.
Yeah, I got a problem with this EBT and food stamp stuff. My brother is diabetic. He's got CalFresh, Medi-Cal, every government subsistence you could imagine. And it pains me because he's got diabetes, and I'll go over to his house and he'll have a soda pop, or he'll have Carl's Jr. or whatever you can get on that. So it's rather difficult to see my tax dollars being spent so he can kill himself. And that's slowly what's happening to him. We should not allow stuff like this in junk food to be purchased with EBT, because then in the long run, we're going to have to pay the medical bills also.
Do you ever have conversations with him about nutrition? Is he aware that the food that he's consuming is going to kill him, or does he just not care?
He doesn't care and uses his democratic logic to say, well, if it has a nutrition value on it, that means Pop-Tart's got a nutrition value to them.
All right. You're cutting out there, but we get the point. Thank you so much for the call, sir. Let's go to Inga in Los Angeles. Inga, hello.
Hi. You know, food stamps in the first place, they should be like for necessity and only in emergency situations. Now here is all that culture what dwells on those food stamps, and it's really funny. You just go to work. There are different jobs all around. Always you can find some work. So if you will be working and not drinking those sugary drinks, then you will be healthy. Then we will not need to spend all that money on diabetes and all those preventions. So for me, it's really funny when somebody sits at home by TV and drinks sugary drinks. You know, if you want to kill yourself, then just jump from the cliff.
All right. Well, that's an option. Harry Carey, thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Catherine in Los Altos. Catherine, hello.
Hi. Yeah. The acronym for the food stamp program is SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. So if it's not providing nutrition, what's the controversy? I mean, the name says it all.
That's a great point, because what these people are purchasing frequently are empty calories. There's no nutritional content in soda. I understand it tastes good. I understand it may make you feel good. People like the caffeine. I get the appeal. I like it myself. I just don't let myself have it all that often because I know it's not good for me. But I guess if you have someone who's willing to give you an unlimited supply of money where you can go to the grocery store and knock yourself out buying as much soda as humanly possible, I guess they figure, why not do it?
Yeah, well, maybe they need to change the name of the program.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you so much for the call. Let's go to Mike in L.A. Mike, hello.
John, I want to thank you because I never knew what EBT meant. I would drive by McDonald's or 7-Eleven and I'd see this EBT. I had no idea what that meant, but now it connected the dots, so thank you very much for that. I wanted to bring up something that I haven't heard yet, and that is, look, I grew up in Chicago. My parents didn't have anything, and I remember sitting around the table in the morning with my mother and my three brothers fishing out bugs from the Rice Krispies because that's what it was, living in a cold water flat, and it was just part of having breakfast. And the reason I bring that up is because here I am, 73 years old now, and my wife and I built a business that employs 16 to 25 people, and I keep thinking to myself, what was it? How did I get from there to here? And what I see missing in these subsequent generations now is this slow evaporation of self-discipline, self-determination, self-contemplation. It's as though somebody sold somebody on the idea that they couldn't exist without somebody on the outside taking care of them. And I think they got hypnotized into that. And this whole idea of buying Coke and buying foods that's bad for you, I think it has to do with their emotional tone level that gets lowered as they lose self-determinism. And I think that accounts for being overweight, that accounts for not working, being on the dole and expecting to be on the dole, and then suddenly turning around and saying, well, now this is how it should be. I should be on the dole. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. That's my view on it.
Well, those are excellent points. And we live in a culture that is aspirational. We live in a culture where there is upward mobility. Not all cultures are like that. You live in India where they have the caste system. You are a part of whatever part of the caste you were born in, and that's where you're going to die. In the United States, it doesn't work like that. If you're poor, you have the opportunity to become middle class or even rich. And the best way to do that is to look at someone who has what you want. Look at someone who's successful. Look at someone who's rich. And look at how they behave. Look at how they run their life. And if you copy how they run their life in your own personal life, you're probably going to like the results. I've been to the homes of many rich people for dinner. Not once have they ever offered me Fruity Pebbles. Usually, rich people have self-discipline, and they have the ability to not eat what they want to eat all the time because they know it's going to make them fat. They know it's going to make them lethargic. They know it's going to make them unhealthy. And rich people, generally speaking, there are exceptions to the rule, like that fat governor of Illinois who happens to be very wealthy. But for the most part, it's the rich people who are thin and the poor people who are fat. If you want to be like them, live like them. And they live with self-discipline. They don't put everything in their trap that they want to eat because they know there are consequences to doing that. And if I'm a poor person and I don't like my living situation, you have to change certain things. And what you put in your mouth is one of them. It may not be the most important thing, but it's certainly an important component of living an overall healthy life. Thank you for the call, sir. That's going to do it for us today. I'll be back tomorrow at noon for another edition of The John Phillips Show.